Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about gardening, botanical history, and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is April 21st. Today we celebrate a man who found all the answers to life in nature, and we still learn from his profound observations. We'll also learn about a botanist and publisher who found fame and forged meaningful connections with top botanical illustrators and horticulturists of his time. We'll hear an excerpt about spring in Paris from an American author and journalist who lives in France. And we grow that garden library today with a fun fiction book about a botany major who feels a kinship with plants that are on the brink of extinction. And then we'll wrap things up with a little article published on this day in 1985. It's all about ferns, and it was written by the great garden writer Francis Perry. But first, it's time for today's curated news. Today's curated news was written by Scarlett James over at The Bustle, and this post is called The 7 Best Indoor Herb Gardens. You know, countertop gardens are all the rage, and as Scarlett points out, these indoor herb gardens became the quarantine hobby that people really got on board with. Now, Scarlett reviews 7 different models, and in general, she advises looking for models that offer full-spectrum grow lights, good drainage, and something compact enough to suit your space, because countertop real estate is valuable and most folks are always in need of more. Now, if you would like to review Scarlett's list of the top 7 indoor herb gardens that you can put on your kitchen countertop, maybe right beside your coffee maker, well, all you need to do is search for the number 7 in the Facebook group for the show, and then Scarlett's post will pop right up. Now, if you're not in the group, it is so easy to join. The next time you're on Facebook, just search for the words Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend, and then request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Now, before we head on to today's botanical history, I want to take a second and quickly welcome this last batch of new members to the Facebook group for the show. So welcome to George Zaldivar, Jennifer Basso, Sarah Long-Smith, Jessica Susser, Leslie Duncan, Jane Campton, Kathy and his bees, Celestin Katanku, Renee Humphrey, Deborah Moffat, Alma Mize, Joshua Maness, and Chris Larson. Welcome to the group, you guys. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and I hope that you find the gardening community on Facebook to be both welcoming and helpful. It's time for today's botanical history. Here's botanical history for today, April 21st. Today is the birthday of the Scottish-American naturalist, conservationist, and author John Muir, who was born on this day, April 21st, in 1838. John was known by many names: John of the Mountains, Father of Yosemite, and Father of the National Parks. In particular, John's work to preserve Yosemite resulted in a famous picture of John posing with President Teddy Roosevelt on overhanging rock at the top of Glacier Point in Yosemite in 1903. And when I was researching Charles Sprague Sargent, the first director of Harvard University's Arnold Arboretum in Boston, I stumbled on a fun little story about both John and Charles that was featured in a 1915 article. Now, this story has become a favorite of mine because it highlights the personality differences between the extroverted John Muir and the very serious Charles Sprague Sargent. Now, to set the stage, it turns out that the two men had gone on a trip one fall. They were planning to hike the mountains in North Carolina. John wrote, "The autumn frosts were just beginning, and the mountains and higher hilltops were gorgeous. We climbed slope after slope through the trees till we came out on the bare top of Grandfather Mountain. There it all lay in the sun below us, ridge upon ridge, each with its typical tree covering and color, all blended with the darker shades of the pines and the green of the deep valleys. I couldn't hold it in and began to jump about and sing and glory in it all. Then I happened to look around and caught sight of Charles standing there as cool as a rock, with a half-amused look on his face at me, but never saying a word. 'Why don't you let yourself out at a sight like that?' I said. 'I don't wear my heart upon my sleeve,' he retorted. 'Who cares where you wear your heart, little man?' I cried. 'There you stand, in the face of all heaven come down on earth, like a critic of the universe, as if to say, "Come, nature, bring on the best you have. I'm from Boston." Isn't that a great story? Well, it was John Muir who said these wonderful quotes. "The mountains are calling, and I must go." In every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks. Everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and pray in, where nature may heal and give strength to body and soul. And finally, between every two pines is a doorway to a new world. And today is the anniversary of the death of the English bookseller, printer, publisher, pharmacist, and botanist Benjamin Maund, who died on this day, April 21st, in 1864. Benjamin had a large garden where he enjoyed cultivating seeds from around the world. He had a special curiosity about wheat and was interested in crossing and growing different wheat cultivars. He even exhibited wheat and gave talks on it when he had time. In 1846, an English newspaper reported that Benjamin was the first botanist to attempt to improve wheat through hybridization. On Christmas Day in 1813, after his father died, Benjamin bought a bookstore and a publishing house. The entrepreneurial move would set the stage for his greatest work, a monthly publication designed to be both useful and affordable called The Botanic Garden. Despite the publication's London imprint, Benjamin lived and worked in the small market town of Bromsgrove all his life. Published between 1825 and 1850, The Botanic Garden brought Benjamin notoriety and authority. Benjamin became a fellow of the Linnean Society, and he even corresponded with other top botanists like Darwin's mentor, John Stevens Henslow of Cambridge University. Benjamin's main goal with the Botanic Garden was to share, quote, hardy, ornamental flowering plants cultivated in Great Britain. And each monthly edition of the Botanic Garden featured a color illustration of 4 different flowers, along with 4 pages of descriptive text. As a result of his work, Benjamin hired some of the best botanical artists of his time, including Augusta Withers, Priscilla Bury, and Edwin Smith. In fact, Benjamin's own daughters, Eliza and Sarah, experimented with botanical illustration, and their work was also featured in the publication. Today, all the issues of the Botanic Garden, along with over 1,200 pieces of original botanical art produced for Benjamin's publication, are preserved at the Natural History Museum in London. And here's a fun little side note about Benjamin. He also introduced a biennial to Britain, the spiny plumeless thistle, or welted thistle, Carduus acanthioides. As with most thistles, the welted thistle is an invasive herb that can grow 1 to 4 feet tall. It has a thick taproot that can grow to a foot long, and the purple to pink flowers can appear individually or in clusters. And although it is a thistle, the welted thistle bloom is really quite pretty. Poignantly, 64 years after Benjamin's death, on this day, April 21st, in 1864, Benjamin's hometown memorialized him with a tablet that shows his head surrounded by a wreath of welted thistle, or Carduus acanthioides. It's time for today's Unearthed Words. Today's Unearthed Words come to us from the American author Elizabeth Bard. This is an excerpt from her book, Lunch in Paris, a Love Story, with recipes. Spring had come to the market as well. Everywhere there were young green things, the tips of asparagus, young leeks no bigger than scallions. There was crisp arugula, curled and tangled, and fresh green peas, plump in their pods. I had no idea what I wanted to make for dinner. This didn't pose a problem. On the contrary, it was an opportunity, a mini adventure. The season's new ingredients brought new ideas. The first baby tomatoes were coming in from Sicily. I bought a box of small red globes still on the vine and a red onion in my favorite childhood shade of royal purple. Maybe I would make a salsa for the do-rod I'd picked up at the fishmonger. I imagined a bright confetti, the tomatoes mixed with freshly chopped coriander, maybe a sunny mango. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Kinship of Clover by Ellen Meeropol. This botany-inspired fiction book came out in 2017 with a theme centered around endangered plants and a premise that examines how to stay true to the people you care about while trying to change the world. In this book, Ellen tells the story of a botany major named Jeremy who's studying at the University of Massachusetts. Jeremy feels a kinship with plants that are nearing or have become extinct. And Jeremy is not a new character. He first appeared in Ellen's book, House Arrest, as a 9-year-old child who had survived family trauma and had found safety in the family greenhouse where he loved to draw plants. This book is 248 pages of one young man's struggle to fight for the environment and climate justice without losing the people he loves. You can get a copy of Kinship of Clover by Ellen Mirapole and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $5. It'll be a fun summer read. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day, April 21st, in 1985, that the garden writer Frances Perry shared a charming article in her regular gardening column in The Observer about how to grow a fern spore. She wrote, "My father-in-law, Amos Perry, once told me that if I pushed a stopperless bottle upside down in moist, shady soil, a fern would grow inside it. So I did just that and then forgot it." 2 years later, while separating some large hellebore plants, we came across the old bottle. Sure enough, there was a baby fern growing inside. The spores can survive in their millions until conditions for growth are right. Next, Frances shared how to propagate ferns. She writes, "The best way to propagate ferns is by division. This is a good time both to plant and divide. Propagation by means of spores is more laborious. Toward the end of summer, the spores are found on the backs of mature fronds. When ripe, they can be shaken off and then sown on fine soil in a pot or pan. Do not cover with soil, but lay a pane of glass over the top to maintain humidity. Stand the pot in a saucer with a little rainwater at its base and keep the temperature at about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Remove the glass for about an hour daily to change the air. Then wipe it dry before returning. Eventually, green cushion-like bodies will appear. Later, first tiny green leaves. It will be at least another 12 months before good plants are produced." Finally, Frances highlights a variety of ferns. Regarding Queen Victoria's fern, she wrote, "Queen Victoria's fern, or Anthurium filix femina. It has 3-foot fronds, and all their segments cross to form V's, as well as boasting crested edges. It was found near a Scottish cart track more than a century ago." Regarding the royal fern, Frances wrote, "No waterside fern is more regal than the royal fern, Osmunda regalis. The 8 to 10-foot fronds once sheltered an ancient British king, Osmond, from marauding Danes." Then Frances shared her favorite ferns for wet gardens and indoor spaces. She wrote, "Good ferns for soggy spots include all the heart's tongues, the netted chain fern, or Woodwardia areolata, which is a creeping plant for swampy ground, and the dwarf oak fern, or Dryopteris plumosum. Ferns suitable for indoor culture include most maidenhairs, or adiantums, which incidentally loathe tobacco smoke, the hare's foot or the squirrel's foot fern, or Divalia fijiensis. That's ideal for hanging baskets with its little brown exposed tubers that look like animal paws. Then you have the large fronded, aptly named ladder ferns, or the Nephrolepis varieties like the sword fern or the Boston fern. And finally, the bird's nest fern, or Asplenium nidus. In nature, Asplenium perches on trees, but our 20-year-old does very well in a large flower pot. Frances wrote, "I only water into the center of the plant, not into the soil." Well, wasn't that a wonderful review of ferns? Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove and Wyoming, Minnesota, with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, and Eric Begay. If you want to read today's show notes, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. And don't forget that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can always get in touch by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.